Welcome to Dr. Mann's teaching series, How to Live a Balanced Life. Dr. Mann is the host of both the television program Real Life and the radio show Real Life Radio. He is also the senior pastor of Riverbend Church in Austin, Texas. And now, Part 8, Fulfilling Friendship.
This morning I want to talk about the seven ups of friendship. And I want to read one verse from John, the 15th chapter. This is the last night Jesus is with his disciples. And he says to them, "From now on, I shall no longer call you my servants, because a servant does not know the heart and mind of his master. Instead, I shall call you friends, because I have revealed to you everything that I heard from my Father." The seven ups of friendship. Was invited to the 4th grade of a local elementary school class. The little girl wrote me a note and said, I was told by several people that if I ask you, because I'm only 10 years old, that you would probably show up. And I said, you got it. I had them write questions. What was the thing that concerned them most? And every child in the class, over 20 children, wrote the same thing. And I don't think they were together. I mean, I just think they did it on their own. How do you make and how do you keep friends? I read an article the other day that said that friendship is a vanishing value in America. 43 million of us move every year, so it's hard in this mobile society. Time pressures. With the oncoming of technology, you can work with a computer all day and not interact with anybody. And friendship is taking it on the chin. We have these substitutes for friendship where we gather around our games and our athletics and our causes, etc. But friendship is a vanishing value. I think the church's greatest future, or the greatest contribution we can make these years and in the years to come, will be talking to people about how to be friends. The most remarkable thing that Jesus ever said, or one of the most, we are always using superlatives, one of the most remarkable things that Jesus ever said was, "I no longer call you servants. I call you my friends, because I've been completely open to you and I've hidden nothing." Friendship from a God was unheard of, and most of us don't think of God as our friend. Jesus came to teach us that God is our friend. And so I started thinking about that, and I thought, what are the ingredients of friendship that Jesus modeled in his lifetime on earth? And I came up with what I call the 7 ups of friendship. I don't think I can remember all this in my head, so I got me a big old outline right there. The 7 ups of friendship. What does it take to be a friend? Modeled by Jesus. The first up is shut up. Confidentiality. You can't have friends without confidentiality. The number one ingredient of being a friend is to be able to keep secrets. I'll never forget when I first started, quote, counseling. I read 2 books on counseling, took Counseling 101, and suddenly I went to this big church, and I was 25 years old, and I was a counselor even though I couldn't even spell it. And a farmer came to see me, and he shared with me a very intimate secret that he'd never shared with anybody else. It was a great tragedy in his life. He explained a lot about his formation. He told me this deep secret. And I said, "Have you never told anybody else this secret?" He said, "Never." I said, "How long have you been married?" 25 years. "And you've never shared this with your mate?" He said, "Are you kidding? Me share that with Ethel? There are only 3 kinds of communication in our town. There's telegraph, telephone, and tell-Ethel." And there are marriages that are not friendships, and there are all kinds of relationships that aren't friendships because we can't maintain confidentiality. Shut up is the first one. The second one is stand up. Every friendship must have loyalty. If you don't have somebody to speak up for you when others are speaking against you, if you don't have somebody to take up for you when you're down, if you don't have somebody who will be there with you when everything falls apart, then you don't have a friend. I saw a list the other day of Dear Abby questions that were never written, that were funny. And one of them said that the Dear Abby story was that a woman wrote her one time and said, "My husband is so untrustworthy, does never stand up for me, he's disloyal, he's cheated on me so much, I'm not sure that the baby I'm carrying is actually his." Stand up. I read a wonderful story about Jackie Robinson, the first professional black baseball player allowed in the National League. and he played for the Brooklyn Dodgers, as you know. And he made a game-losing error, or what appeared to be a game-losing error, and he began to hear shouts for the first time from the Brooklyn Dodger fans, and there were racial slurs and all kinds of dirty words. And Jackie Robinson would later write that this was the lowest point in his life. And in the midst of all the jeering, little Pee Wee Reese, the second baseman or shortstop or whatever he was, came over and just put it. He was from the South, raised in the arms of prejudice. Put his arm around Jackie Robinson and just stood there and glared at the stands. And after a long moment, one or two started clapping. And then the whole crescendo of applause broke out. And later Robinson would write, "This was the turning point in my career. Pee Wee Reese, putting his arm around me, standing with me, changed my life, because I realized if there were one Southern white boy who could love a black boy like Reese loved me, that I did not need anything else to succeed." Stand up. Friends, stand up for each other. The third up of friendship is show up. Everybody needs someone who will be there. And being there is more important than anything you can ever imagine. In my last 14 months of grief, and I'm doing better on that, but I keep coming back to the fact that so many people have showed up. So many people have been there for me. And you'll ask me how I'm doing, and I don't tell you. I lie and say I'm doing great, because you can't help me anyway. And besides, that's not what that conversation is all about. What that conversation is all about is that you're saying, we care. And I'm saying, I know. And I've got to get on with my life. I have learned that the hard way. I don't know how I would have lived these last 14 months if it hadn't been for you and the many people who have been so gracious to me. I have a dear friend from West Texas named John Pittman. Many years ago, our daughter was very sick. She was on drugs, and we had to take her to a hospital like 2,000 miles away. We'd either have to drive, or we couldn't take her on a commercial plane because she was too disturbed and too upset. And I called the only fellow I knew who had an airplane that would take me 2,000 miles quickly. I called John up and I said, "John, I need a favor." He said, "You got it." I said, "But I haven't told you what the favor is." He said, "Well, evidently I can grant it, or you wouldn't have called me up. What is it you want?" And I said, "I need for you to fly your airplane, send your airplane to help my daughter." He said, "Well, I already told you got it. Just tell me the time and the place and I'll have it there." That you never forget. Shut up, stand up, show up. Friends, show up. The fourth up of friendship is called speak up. Friendships cannot endure without plain speaking. It's interesting to read through the Bible again in the life of Jesus and see how he spoke up so plainly. Every time somebody started trying to promote a lie, Jesus would speak plainly. He said to Simon Peter, Peter said, "I will never leave you. Everybody else will, but not me." And he said, "Let me tell you the truth. Tonight before the rooster crows, or in the morning, you will deny me 3 times. One time his disciples were arguing behind his back about who would be number 1 in the kingdom. You remember that? And Jesus just jumped right into the middle of that. The time he met the woman outside the well at Samaria, and he said, "Do you have a husband?" She said, "No, I don't." He said, "You're right. You've had 7 husbands, and the guy you're living with now is not your husband." Speak up. Plain speaking. You know, in Matthew 18, Jesus tells us, the church, his followers, how to resolve conflicts. And I'm amazed at how much we ignore it. I'm amazed at how much I ignore it. He said, if a brother offends you, you go to the brother and say, "Hey, you have offended me, and I'm here to try to resolve the conflict." Don't sit around and sulk and say, "How long is it going to take him to figure out that he's insulted me?" If you've been insulted, go and say, "You've insulted me." And he says, because if you can settle it in private with plain speaking, you will have a friend for life. If that doesn't work, get 2 or 3 witnesses. If that doesn't work, take it to the whole church. If that doesn't work, treat them like a tax collector. That's what Jesus said. It's in Matthew 18. Plain speaking. Speak up. Shut up, stand up, show up, speak up. Is that 4? The 5th one is, I got it, make up. Make up. Friendships are impossible without forgiveness and reconciliation. The more you know somebody, the more about their faults you're going to recognize. And the more you recognize their faults, the more it's going to take for forgiveness to kick in. Lois and I had a big fight one time on the phone, and I got home that day and the place was empty. She says, "Dear Gerald, I've gone shopping. I hate you. Love, Lois." I like the story about the guy who went to the doctor. His wife went with him, and after the full exam, we'll put the guy out in the ante room and took the wife inside, and the doctor said, "Okay, let me tell you something. Unless your husband's going to die, unless you wake him up every morning with orange juice and his paper and coffee, and then prepare a good meal for him at noon, make sure he has everything he wants, and then have a full-course dinner followed by a glass of wine, and then in between shower him with loves and kisses and never refuse any of his advances from a love standpoint." She wrote all that down, walked out in the ante room. He said, "Well, the doctor said, you're going to die." I like that one. There are no perfect relationships, and it takes forgiveness. There's no way she could admit that. It takes forgiveness. Yeah. You got to make up if you want to have a friendship. Shut up, stand up, show up, speak up. Gosh, I might get through this in 15 minutes. Make up. The sixth one, because I wanted 7 ups, is what I call re-up. It doesn't matter how long you've been a friend with somebody. Periodically, you need to re-up. You need to say, "Hey, these are my commitments, and my commitment to you has never failed, and I will always be your friend." I was at a very, very low moment in my life, and I don't even remember now what the issue was, but it seems like I'm in a crisis of some kind all the time. Lois said living with me is like living in the middle of a freeway. If you lean too far one way, you're going to get hit, and if you lean too, Anyway, I didn't mean to get into that. That wasn't even that's not even the notes. I was really down. I got a call from one of my heroes, Darrell Royal. He said, "Preacher, how you doing?" "Great." He said, "Liar." He said, I have this book of all my friends, and I try to call them alphabetically or whenever they come to mind." He said, "I just didn't have any reason to call you except I got down to the M's in my address book." And he said, "I just wanted to tell you that what a good friend you've been to me and how much I appreciate it, and I will always be your friend. I got to go. We got to get to the ends." And he hung up. I call that re-up. I met with my dear lifelong friend and mentor, Browning Ware, last week. We went and had lunch. His wife has been institutionalized with Alzheimer's while my friend Browning is fighting cancer. He's been in a 4-year bout with it. He's now getting toward the last stages where he's taking some of the more severe treatments. And we went to lunch, and I just sat there with my head down looking at the plate. He says, "What's wrong?" I said, "What's wrong? Lois is gone. You're sick, and I can't do a darn thing to change it." He says, "Well, that's true. You can't do a darn thing to change it. But just being here with me and having lunch is enough. Don't give me answers, and let's not talk about my illness." He said, "First, let's talk about the fun we've had." And, of course, that took half the afternoon away. We had such a good time. It was a time to re-up. And he said, as we got ready to go, he said to me, "I'm trying to finish all of the business that I have, the negative business, with all my friends." There was one point there we talked about a mutual friend that we hadn't heard from for a long time. He said, "That's one more on my list I need to settle." But here's this warm, gracious, brilliant, vibrant Christian man with life ebbing away from him. And his main concern is that he re-up with all of his friends. Shut up, stand up, show up, speak up, make up, re-up. And the 7th up of friendship is to look up. Where does God play a role in friendships? God plays a role by making sure that we know that our friends are gifts. I didn't earn my friends. You didn't earn your friends. And I'm not talking about those people that you like to play together with or that your friendship is based on something else. But real friends, friends who love you and know who you are, and love you anyway, people you don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing. Those kinds of people are gifts. I mean, I have friendships with some of the weirdest people. One day I was playing golf with Willie Nelson, and that doesn't matter. Well, now I'm into it, aren't I? I said, how you reckon we got to be good friends? He said, well, it was all meant to be. He said, it was in a former life we were probably good friends. I said, there you go with that Hindu stuff again. We hit the ball up to the green. It was an elevated green. We couldn't see it. We walked up there, and on the green, our balls were that far apart. He said, see, it's not Hindu junk. He said, it was meant to be. What a friend. Shut up, stand up, speak up, show up, make up, re-up, but look up. All of your friends are really gifts from God. I had a reading the other day that I saved. I hope I can find it, and I hope I can read it. I really like this. I don't know if you like it or not. Doesn't matter. I'm going to do it anyway. If you can start your day without caffeine, continue it without pep pills, and sleep without sedatives, if you can refrain from complaining when you're ignored, if you can resist boring others with all your troubles, if you can eat the same food every day and be grateful, if you can forgive those who take their frustrations out on you, if you can treat your rich friends the same as you treat your poor friends, if you have absolutely no prejudice against color, creed, politics, or religion, if you can forgive others every time they hurt you, if you can keep every secret, no matter what, then you will be almost as good as your dog. Man's best what? Friend, yeah. I no longer call you servants. From now on, I call you friends because I have revealed everything to you that the Father told me to do. There's nothing more precious than a friend. I think being in love is important, but being in like is more important. I see people who are married. I see people with their kids. I see brothers and sisters. And this has happened some in my own family. I don't mind having to, well, I don't like to tell you that, but we're held together by many other things, but there's nothing more refreshing or more an evidence of God's grace than friendship. I no longer call you servants. I call you friends. Where do you start? There are no perfect friendships, but where do you start to repair or to create or to build the basis for friendships? You start by making friends with God and Jesus Christ. And our hope is in Jesus Christ. You know what Jesus said he was doing? He said, I'm leaving you here. I'm going to heaven. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to be your advocate. I'm going to stand at the right hand of God, and every time something comes up that proves you guys ought to be singed, I'm going to say, wait a minute, Lord. I'm here to intercede. Can you imagine that? I'm here to intercede with you, God, in behalf of Gerald and Pat and Gordon. And gee, he not only knows our names, but he's our friend. Make friends with Jesus Christ. That's the whole point of this sermon. Young people, let Jesus be the friend that he wants you to be. Let's pray. Father, thank you for friends. Thank you for people who believe in us and care for us and put up with us. And thank you for the grace that makes that possible. And let every person in this room and those who will hear this all across America on television and even the world, help them to know that you stand ready to be their friend. All we have to do is open the door. Amen.
This concludes Dr. Gerald Mann's teaching series, How to Live a Balanced Life. Dr. Mann's books and audio cassettes are available from Gerald Mann Ministries by calling 1-800-974-HOPE. That's 1-800-974-4673. Or you can write to us at Post Office Box 160-100, Austin, Texas 78716. You can also visit us on the web at www.gmm.org. Thank you for listening.